The thunderous crack of floodwater tearing through Winding Creek Valley sent birds fleeing skyward as Emma Carson clutched her 6-month-old daughter against her chest, the wagon beneath her already beginning to lift with the surging current. It was 1876 in the Arizona Territory, and what had begun as a simple journey to her sister's homestead was rapidly becoming a fight for survival. "Hold on, Lily," Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she climbed atop the wagon seat, desperately searching for higher ground. The roar of rushing water drowned out her daughter's frightened cries. The hired driver was already gone, swept away in the first violent surge that had caught them at the riverbed crossing. Emma had been warned about flash floods in this region, how the narrow canyons could fill within minutes when storms gathered in the distant mountains. But the morning sky had been clear when she'd set out, her baby Lily bundled safely beside her, the driver confident they could make the crossing before any weather turned. The wagon lurched, tipping precariously as the muddy torrent rose higher. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized they were moments from being swept away. She tore at the canvas cover, creating an opening to scan the ridge above for any chance of rescue. There was none, only the merciless water climbing inch by inch toward her feet. "Please, God," she prayed, "not like this, not Lily." From the ridge above, Isaac Reed watched in horror as the flood swallowed the valley floor. He had been tracking a mountain lion that had been preying on his cattle when the distant rumble of floodwater reached his ears. Now, astride his sturdy chestnut-gelding Thunder, he spotted the stranded wagon and the woman clutching something to her chest. A baby, he realized, with a jolt of panic. Thunder snorted nervously, sensing his rider's tension. The horse knew the smell of floodwater well. 15 years ago, another flood had taken Isaac's wife Sarah and their infant daughter while he'd been away fighting. The memory flashed unbidden, returning to find nothing but mud and debris where his home had stood. Isaac's weathered face hardened, the long scar running from his right eye to his jaw, whitening against his sun-darkened skin. At 43, the former cavalry lieutenant carried the marks of too many battles, too many losses. His blue eyes, once described by Sarah as summer sky, now held the deep, watchful coldness of winter ice. "Not this time," he whispered to Thunder, spurring the horse down the slope. "Not if I can help it." The gelding's powerful legs ate up the distance despite the treacherous terrain. Water was already swirling around the wagon's wheels, the woman now standing atop the seat, her face a mask of terror. "Hold on," Isaac shouted, though he knew his voice couldn't possibly carry over the roar of the flood. He reached for the coiled rope at his saddle, quickly fashioning it into a lifeline, tying one end securely to Thunder's saddle horn. The water was rising faster than he'd anticipated, already reaching the wagon bed. In moments, the entire rig would be swept away. With a quick prayer, Isaac guided Thunder directly into the churning water at the edge of the flood. The horse balked momentarily, then plunged forward at his insistent urging. The frigid water immediately soaked Isaac to his waist, the current tugging dangerously at Thunder's legs. 20 more feet, Isaac muttered, his eyes fixed on the woman who now saw him coming. Her face transformed with desperate hope as she clutched her baby tighter. The wagon shifted suddenly, beginning to tilt as the floodwater undermined its wheels. Emma screamed, struggling to maintain her balance while protecting her child. For a moment, she thought the horseman might be a hallucination. No one would ride voluntarily into this death trap. "Jump to me!" Isaac shouted when he was close enough, extending his arms. Emma shook her head in terror, frozen in place, as the wagon groaned beneath her. What if she dropped Lily in the churning waters? "The wagon's going!" Isaac called. You have to jump now." With a splintering crack, the wagon began to roll. Emma, seeing no other choice, leapt toward the stranger with Lily clutched tightly against her. Isaac lunged forward, catching her around the waist as the wagon disappeared beneath the churning surface behind them. The current instantly pulled at them, threatening to drag all three under. Isaac gritted his teeth, one arm holding the woman and child, while the other fought against the flood's pull. Thunder had retreated to safer ground, the rope stretching taut between them. "Hold on to my neck," Isaac gasped. When Emma complied, he used both arms to swim, angling toward where his horse waited. Each stroke was a battle against nature's fury, his muscles burning with the effort of fighting the current while supporting two additional lives. It felt as though death itself were pulling at his ankles, trying to claim what it had been denied. "Not today," Isaac thought grimly, kicking harder against the greedy water. After what seemed like an eternity, Isaac felt his boots touch ground. He staggered to his feet, still holding Emma and her child, as he waded through progressively shallower water until they reached the muddy bank where Thunder waited. Collapsing onto solid ground, Isaac gulped air into his burning lungs. Beside him, the woman was doing the same while checking her baby with frantic hands. The child remarkably had stopped crying and was staring at Isaac with eyes that seemed too knowing for an infant. "Is your little one all right?" Isaac managed between breaths. Emma nodded, tears mixing with the water streaming down her face. Yes, she's okay." Her voice broke as she looked at her rescuer. "You saved us. You risked your life." Isaac pushed himself to a sitting position, water streaming from his clothes. "Anyone would have." "No," Emma said firmly, meeting his eyes. "They wouldn't have. You dove from your horse into a flash flood to save strangers." Her grip on her baby tightened. "I'm Emma Carson, and this is Lily. I owe you our lives, Mr. Reed." Isaac Reed. He managed a smile despite his exhaustion. As Isaac checked on Thunder, Emma noticed a small cut on her arm, likely from the splintering wagon. Blood mingled with water dripping onto her torn sleeve. "You're hurt," Isaac said, returning to her side. He pulled a red bandana from his pocket, tying it gently around her wound. "It's not much, but it'll stop the bleeding till we can clean it properly." The simple care in his rough hands sent an unexpected warmth through Emma's chilled body. She studied him as he worked. The stern lines of his face, the silver streaking his dark hair, the old scar that spoke of violence survived. Most of all, she noticed his eyes, how they softened when they fell on Lily holding a pain that seemed far deeper than the physical exhaustion of their rescue. Thunder suddenly raised his head, ears pricked forward. In the distance, firelight flickered on a hillside. A moment later, the crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley. "We need to move," Isaac said sharply, rising to his feet. "Comancheros sometimes follow the floods, looking for stranded travelers to rob." "Comancheros?" Emma asked, clutching Lily closer. "Outlaws, Mexican bandits, renegade Comanche deserters, the worst of everything." Isaac helped Emma to her feet. "My ranch is about 3 miles from here. Can you ride?" Before Emma could answer, another shot rang out closer this time. Thunder snorted nervously, pawing the ground. Isaac's hand moved to the Winchester rifle in his saddle scabbard, his expression hardening into something that sent a chill through Emma, despite her gratitude. In that moment, she glimpsed something dangerous in her rescuer, a man accustomed to violence. "Can you ride?" he repeated more urgently. Emma looked down at Lily, then back at Isaac. "Yes," she said firmly. "We can ride." The Comancheros found their trail before they'd gone half a mile. Isaac heard them coming, 3 riders pushing their horses hard through the scrub oak that dotted the valley floor. "Get down!" he ordered, helping Emma dismount behind a large boulder. "Stay here with Lily." Emma crouched low, pressing herself against the rock, her body curled protectively around her daughter. Isaac positioned himself at the edge of the boulder, Winchester raised, waiting. The first rider appeared in the fading light, a broad-shouldered man with a red bandana tied around his head. He spotted thunder and pulled up sharply, raising a hand to warn the others. Isaac aimed carefully and fired a warning shot that kicked up dust inches from the man's horse. The animal reared, nearly unseating its rider. "That's far enough," Isaac called out. "Next one won't miss." The leader studied the situation clearly, noting Isaac's position and assessing his chances. After a tense moment, he spat and waved his companions back. "This territory ain't big enough for both of us, Reed." He called his accent heavy with Mexico. "Then I suggest you find new territory, Vasquez," Isaac replied coldly. The Comancheros retreated, but Isaac remained vigilant until they were well out of sight. When he finally returned to Emma, she was staring at him with new wariness. "You know them?" she asked quietly. "I know their kind," Isaac answered, holstering his rifle. "The leader's Ramon Vasquez. He's raided 3 homesteads in the last year." He offered his hand to help her up. "We should keep moving. They might circle back." The rest of the journey passed in tense silence, Emma sensing Isaac's heightened alertness with every cracking twig or nightbird call. When they finally crested a rise, Emma saw a modest but well-maintained ranch spread out below them, a sturdy cabin with a large barn and corral. Several cattle grazed in the distance and smoke curled from the cabin's chimney. "You have help?" Emma asked, surprised to see the smoke. "Just my ranch hand, Joe Quinn. He's been with me for 5 years now." As they approached, a weathered Mexican man emerged from the barn, his long silver hair tied back, his face deeply lined from decades under the harsh frontier sun. His eyes widened at the sight of their waterlogged appearance and the unexpected guests. "Dios mío, what happened?" Joe called, rushing to help them dismount. "Flash flood caught Miss Carson and her baby at Winding Creek Crossing." Isaac explained carefully, lifting Emma down before taking the baby while she steadied herself. "The poor señorita and niña," Joe said sympathetically. "Come inside quickly. I will take care of the horse." Isaac led Emma and Lily into the cabin, which was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling. A large fireplace dominated one wall with comfortable-looking chairs drawn up before it. Simple but sturdy furniture filled the main room, and Emma could see a kitchen area and 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. "You'll need dry clothes," Isaac said, suddenly aware of their predicament. I don't have any women's things, but I can offer you a shirt and trousers." "That would be wonderful." "Thank you," Emma said, saving him from his awkwardness. "And perhaps something we could use as a blanket for Lily." Isaac nodded, disappearing into one of the bedrooms. He returned with a clean flannel shirt, a pair of trousers, and a soft wool blanket. The items seemed too fine for a rancher, particularly the woman's nightgown he offered for Lily. "The bedroom's yours," he said, gesturing to the door. "There's water in the pitcher for washing up. I'll see what we can do about warming some milk for the little one." Emma's gratitude shone in her eyes as she took the offered items and retreated to the bedroom. Once alone, she quickly stripped off her sodden clothing and dried herself with a towel Isaac had provided. His shirt hung nearly to her knees, and she had to roll the trouser's waistband several times, but the dry clothing felt like heaven against her chilled skin. She unwrapped Lily, relieved to find that her innermost wrappings had stayed relatively dry thanks to the oilcloth she'd used to protect her from the journey's dust. After drying her daughter and wrapping her in the wool blanket, Emma noticed a small portrait on the bedside table, a pretty, dark-haired woman holding an infant, both smiling at the painter. With a start, Emma realized whose room she was occupying. When she returned to the main room, Isaac was heating milk in a small pot over the fire. Joe had brought in their few belongings that had been salvaged from the saddlebags, including Emma's small carpet bag. "You seem to know something about babies," Emma observed, watching Isaac test the milk's temperature on his wrist. Isaac looked up, a shadow crossing his face. "My sister had 2 little ones before she passed. I helped when I could." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly, sensing there was more to the story but not wanting to pry. Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Family's precious out here." He poured the warmed milk into a cup and handed it to Emma. "It's not ideal for feeding her, but it should do until we can get you both to your sisters." Emma sat in one of the chairs by the fire, cradling Lily as she carefully helped her drink from the cup. Isaac busied himself hanging their wet clothes near the fire to dry, then excused himself to change his own sodden garments. When he returned, Joe had come in from the barn and was busily preparing a hearty stew for dinner. The older man chatted amiably with Emma, asking about her journey and cooing over little Lily, who seemed to have recovered completely from their ordeal and was now gurgling happily. As they ate dinner, Emma learned that Isaac had come to Arizona Territory 10 years earlier after serving in the Union Army during the Civil War. He'd worked as a ranch hand until saving enough to buy this small spread, which he'd slowly built into a modest but successful cattle operation. "And you, señorita," Joe asked, "how does a young mother come to travel alone through such dangerous country?" Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "My husband died before Lily was born. Influenza took him last winter." The pain in her voice was evident despite the time that had passed. "I was teaching at a school in Missouri, but after losing Daniel, I couldn't stay. My sister Martha has been begging me to join her family in Silver Springs." "I'm sorry for your loss," Isaac said quietly. The simple words carried genuine sympathy. Emma nodded her thanks, blinking back unexpected tears. "I thought a new start would be best for both of us." She looked down at Lily, who was now sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle Isaac had fashioned from a drawer padded with blankets. As the evening wore on, Isaac excused himself to check on the livestock, while Joe regaled Emma with stories of the territory. The old ranch hand's voice dropped to a near whisper when he spoke of the Apache, a mix of respect and wariness in his tone. "You speak of them as if you know them well," Emma observed. Joe's weathered face creased in a smile. "My mother was Chiricahua Apache. My father a Mexican trader." He gently rocked Lily's makeshift cradle with his foot. "I have lived in both worlds, belonged to neither." When he spoke to Lily in soft Spanish, Emma caught a glimpse of old pain in his eyes. "You had children of your own." Joe nodded once. "A son. He died fighting with Juarez against Maximilian, many years ago now." He rose to his feet. "The past is like the desert, señorita. Beautiful, but best not wandered in too long without water." After Joe retired to his small room attached to the barn, Emma found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind. The terror of the flood, the miraculous rescue, and the strange sanctuary she'd found with these 2 solitary men. Rising from bed, she wrapped Isaac's oversized shirt more tightly around herself and went to check on Lily. Finding her daughter sleeping peacefully, Emma noticed a sliver of light beneath the cabin door and the low murmur of a voice outside. Curiosity drew her to the window. In the silver moonlight, she saw Isaac kneeling before a small grave marker behind the cabin, his head bowed. His voice carried faintly through the night air. "Sarah, our daughter, saved someone today." His words were soft-broken. "A mother and child like you and Elizabeth. I couldn't save you both then, but today was different." Emma's heart clenched as understanding dawned. The portrait, the nightgown, the way Isaac had known how to care for Lily. He'd once been a father, a husband, and he'd lost them both. Inadvertently, she knocked over a small tin on the windowsill. The clatter seemed deafening in the quiet night. Isaac's head snapped up, his hand instantly moving to his holster. When he saw Emma framed in the window, his expression changed from dangerous vigilance to something unreadable. Their eyes met across the moonlit yard. Two souls, acquainted with grief, connected by the strange threads of circumstance and survival. Neither spoke, but something passed between them. In that moment, something that changed the air, like the electric charge before a storm. Emma stepped back from the window, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Outside, Isaac remained kneeling by the grave. The red bandana he'd used to bind Emma's wound clutched in his hand, like a talisman against the gathering darkness. Morning brought clarity and awkwardness in equal measure. Emma woke to find fresh clothes laid outside her door, a simple calico dress that Joe Quinn had ridden to a neighboring ranch to borrow. The gesture touched her deeply, though the dress hung loosely on her frame, clearly meant for someone of more substantial build. In the main room, Isaac was studying a worn map spread across the table, his finger tracing the route to Silver Springs. He looked up as Emma entered Lily, cooing contentedly in her arms. A moment of uncomfortable silence passed between them, the midnight encounter at the window hanging unspoken in the air. "Joe checked the creek this morning," Isaac said finally. "The water's receded enough to cross safely, though the main road will be muddy for days." He folded the map with precise movements. "I'll take you to your sister's today." Emma nodded, unexpected disappointment settling in her chest. "Thank you. You've already done so much for us." Isaac's eyes flickered to the red bandana now wrapped around her wounded arm. "It's nothing. Anyone would—" "Please don't say anyone would have done the same," Emma interrupted gently. "We both know that's not true." Before Isaac could respond, Joe entered with fresh eggs and a proud smile. "Breakfast is ready, and the horses are saddled. The Nina's milk is warmed, too." He cooed at Lily in Spanish, the baby reaching for his weathered finger with surprising strength. As they ate breakfast, Emma studied the cabin more carefully in the morning light. The bookshelves caught her attention. Alongside practical manuals on ranching and animal husbandry stood volumes on law history and several leather-bound tomes with official military seals. "You're well read for a rancher," she observed. A flicker of something, wariness perhaps, crossed Isaac's face. "Books pass the time in winter," he said simply, but his eyes slid away from hers toward the cavalry saber mounted on the wall beside the stone fireplace. After breakfast, Isaac helped Emma mount the gentle mare Joe had prepared, then carefully handed Lily up to her. They had fashioned a secure sling that allowed Emma to carry Lily while keeping both hands free for riding. With a final wave to Joe, who pressed a small cloth doll made of red fabric into Lily's hands, for protection, they set out, taking the trail that wound through stands of pine before connecting with the main road to Silver Springs. The Arizona landscape unfolded around them in breathtaking majesty, towering red mesas, deep canyons, and valleys carpeted with sagebrush that shimmered silver green in the morning light. Under different circumstances, Emma might have found it beautiful. Now she saw only the dangers lurking in every shadow, every rocky outcropping. Isaac rode slightly ahead, alert for any sign of trouble, his Winchester within easy reach across his saddle. His posture spoke of military training, spine-straight eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Emma found herself wondering how much of the stern, solitary rancher was shaped by whatever battles he'd fought, whatever losses he'd endured. "Tell me about Silver Springs," Isaac said after they'd been riding for an hour, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Emma welcomed the chance to think of something beyond their precarious journey. My sister Martha married a blacksmith named James Townsend. They've built a good life there over the past 8 years. James's forge is apparently the only one for 20 miles. At the mention of Silver Springs, Isaac's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. And they have a spring on their property. Yes, Martha writes that it's what makes their land so valuable. Clear, sweet water year-round. Emma shifted Lily in her sling. Why do you ask? Isaac was quiet for a moment too long. Water rights are complicated in these parts. Springs that flow year-round are coveted. Something in his tone made Emma uneasy. Has my sister's family had trouble? You mentioned your sister's letters spoke of a man named Prescott causing difficulties. Emma nodded. Gordon Prescott. Martha said he's been pressuring them to sell since last year, becoming increasingly unpleasant about it. Gordon Prescott works for Grant Harrington, Isaac said grimly, the largest landowner in the territory. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. And this Harrington wants my sister's land. Harrington wants control of all the water in the county. Your sister's spring feeds the creek that runs through several smaller homesteads. Isaac looked back at her, his blue eyes serious. Whoever controls that water controls everything downstream. But surely there are laws. Laws mean little without men willing to enforce them. Isaac cut in, then softened his tone. I'm sorry. I don't mean to frighten you. Your brother-in-law James is well respected. The community will stand with him. They stopped at midday beside a small creek to rest the horses. As Isaac checked their mounts, Emma settled with Lily on a sun-warmed rock, watching him move with the efficient economy of a man accustomed to hard work and self-reliance. You mentioned you were in the army, she said, curiosity getting the better of her. During the war, Isaac stiffened slightly. Yes, Union cavalry. He didn't elaborate. My father fought for the Union as well, at Shiloh. Emma fed Lily from the bottle of milk Joe had prepared. He taught history at the school, where I later taught. Isaac's expression softened slightly. A teacher like you, like my husband, too. Emma smiled sadly. Daniel and I met at the school. He taught mathematics, while I taught reading and history. Isaac nodded, his eyes distant. Education matters out here. Too many children growing up without learning their letters or figures. Perhaps I'll teach again someday, Emma said, surprising herself with the hope in her voice. It was the first time since Daniel's death that she'd thought of a future beyond mere survival. When Lily finished feeding, Isaac approached hesitantly. May I? He asked, gesturing to the baby. Emma handed Lily to him, watching as his large calloused hands cradled her daughter with surprising gentleness. Lily stared up at him with wide, curious eyes, then reached for the scar on his face. No, little one, Emma began, but Isaac shook his head. It's all right, he said softly, letting Lily's tiny fingers explore the jagged line. She's just curious. No fear in her. How did you get it? Emma asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. I'm sorry, that's too personal. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on Lily. Saber cut. Washita River. The words came reluctantly heavy with unspoken memories. November 68. Emma's breath caught. Even in Missouri they'd heard of the Washita River massacre. Custer's attack on a peaceful Cheyenne village, women and children killed in their sleep. You were with Custer. Isaac's jaw tightened. 7th Cavalry, but I wasn't at Washita. He handed Lily back to Emma, his movements suddenly stiff. We should keep moving. I want to reach Miller's Crossing before dark. As they rode on, Emma sensed she'd touched a wound far deeper than the physical scar. She didn't press further, but the mention of Washita had shifted something between them. A door briefly opened, then firmly closed. They stopped again in the late afternoon to water the horses at a small spring. While Emma changed, Lily Isaac taught her how to load and fire the small Remington Derringer he carried as a backup weapon. "Just in case," he said, placing the pistol in her hands. "2 shots. Aim for the center of the body, not the head. And don't hesitate." The cool metal felt alien in Emma's grip, but she listened carefully to his instructions, determined to protect Lily, whatever the cost. "You're a natural," Isaac observed as she hit the rock target on her second attempt. "Steady hands." "My father believed women should know how to defend themselves," Emma explained, returning the Derringer to him. "He taught me to shoot when I was 12. A ghost of a smile touched Isaac's lips. "A wise man." As Isaac adjusted her grip for another practice shot, his hands covering hers to demonstrate the proper stance, Emma became acutely aware of his proximity. The solid warmth of him at her back, the faint scent of leather and wilderness. Something fluttered in her chest, a feeling she'd thought buried with Daniel. The moment was broken by the distant thunder of hoofbeats. Isaac instantly pushed the Derringer into Emma's hands and drew his Winchester, moving to a position where he could see the trail below. "Get behind those rocks," he ordered quietly. "Take Lily and stay down." Emma didn't question him, gathering Lily and hurrying to the shelter of a large boulder. From her position, she could just make out a group of riders on the main trail, 8 or 9 men moving at a steady pace. At their head rode a broad-shouldered man on a magnificent black stallion. Isaac's posture changed subtly as he recognized the riders. His finger hovered near the trigger of his rifle, his body coiled with tension. "Harrington," he murmured, though Emma wasn't sure if he meant her to hear. The riders passed without looking up toward the spring, continuing down the trail toward Silver Springs. When they were well out of sight, Isaac returned to Emma, his expression grim. "Grant Harrington and his men," he confirmed. "Heading to Silver Springs ahead of us." "Why?" Emma asked, though she suspected the answer. "Nothing good," Isaac said grimly. "We need to change our route. They'll have men watching the main trail now they know I'm escorting you." "How would they know that?" Isaac's expression darkened. "Harrington has eyes everywhere. Someone at the neighboring ranch must have talked when Joe borrowed that dress." He studied the horizon, calculating. "There's an old Apache trail that cuts through the high country. It would bring us to Silver Springs from the north, avoiding the main road entirely." "Is it safe?" Emma asked, adjusting Lily in her arms. "Safer than the main road with Harrington's men watching it," Isaac replied. "But it's rough going, not an easy ride, especially with Lily." Emma straightened her shoulders. "We can manage. I won't let Harrington threaten my family because of me." Isaac's admiration for her grew visible in his eyes. With a nod, he helped her remount, and they set off on a steep trail that climbed into the foothills. As they ascended, Isaac explained more about Harrington's operations in the territory. "He came out here after the war like many of us. Started buying land, then water rights. When people wouldn't sell, accidents started happening. Cattle poisoned, barns burned. And the law does nothing?" Emma asked, incredulous. Isaac's laugh was bitter. "Sheriff Burke owes his position to Harrington. The territorial governor is 3 days' hard ride away in Prescott, and he has bigger concerns than land disputes." "Then who stands against him?" Isaac was quiet for a moment. "Men like your brother-in-law, small ranchers, people with something worth fighting for." They had climbed high enough now to see the valley stretching below them, the main road a distant ribbon winding through the landscape. The trail narrowed dangerously, hugging the mountainside with a sheer drop to their right. "Stay close to the wall," Isaac instructed, leading his horse carefully around a treacherous bend. Emma followed his example, her heart racing as loose stones skittered over the edge, falling into silence. Lily remarkably remained quiet, her eyes wide as she took in the changing landscape. "She's an extraordinary baby," Isaac commented when they reached a wider section of trail. "Most would be crying from the jostling alone." Emma smiled, stroking her daughter's cheek. "Daniel always said she'd be strong like me, but I think she has his calm nature." "Tell me about him," Isaac said, surprising himself with the request. Emma looked up, startled, then her expression softened. "Daniel was a school teacher like me. That's how we met. He was kind and thoughtful, always putting others before himself." She paused, lost in memory. "He loved books and music and had the most wonderful laugh. When he got sick, it happened so quickly. One week, he was teaching his students, the next." Her voice faltered. Isaac moved his horse closer, his face softening with compassion. "I'm sorry you lost him." Emma nodded, blinking back tears. The hardest part was knowing Lily would never know her father. He was so excited about her coming. They rode in silence for a moment, the bond between them deepening with the shared understanding of loss. Finally, Isaac spoke. "The red bandana you're wearing," he said hesitantly. "It belonged to my wife, Sarah." Emma's hand went to the cloth still wrapped around her wounded arm. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "No," Isaac interrupted gently. "I wanted you to have it. She would have liked that it helped someone." Before Emma could respond, Isaac's horse halted suddenly, ears pricked forward. In the same instant, Isaac raised his hand for silence, his posture alert. Emma froze, clutching Lily closer. "Someone's following us," Isaac whispered, dismounting silently and helping Emma down. "Stay here with the horses." Drawing his revolver, Isaac moved back along the trail, his footsteps noiseless on the rocky ground. Emma held her breath, one hand covering Lily's mouth in case she should cry. The seconds stretched into minutes, the silence broken only by the occasional clink of the horse's bits. Then, without warning, Lily let out a sharp wail. The sound echoed off the canyon walls like a gunshot. Emma's blood turned to ice as a rough voice called out from around the bend. "I hear you, lady. No point hiding now." Heavy footsteps approached, and a tall figure appeared on the trail, one of Harrington's men, his gun drawn, his smile revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Well, ain't this interesting?" he drawled. "The boss will be mighty pleased when I bring you in." Emma backed away, fumbling for the derringer Isaac had given her. "Stay back," she warned, her voice steadier than she felt. The man laughed, advancing slowly. "Or what little lady you gonna shoot me with that toy?" "No," came Isaac's voice from behind the man. "But I will." The ambusher whirled to find Isaac's revolver pressed against the back of his head. In one swift movement, Isaac disarmed him, then slammed the butt of his gun against the man's temple. The tracker crumpled to the ground unconscious. Emma stared, shocked by the sudden violence. Isaac quickly bound the man's hands and feet with rope from his saddlebags, then gagged him with a bandana. "He'll be found eventually," Isaac said grimly, "but not before we reach Silver Springs." He looked at Emma, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" Emma nodded, still clutching the derringer. "Yes," Lily's cries saved us in a way. Isaac's expression softened as he looked at the baby. Smart girl, creating a distraction. He helped Emma remount, then leaned close to say something to the unconscious tracker that Emma couldn't hear. The cold fury in his face made her shiver. As they continued their journey, now moving with greater urgency, Emma's mind raced with questions. Who was this man who had saved them twice now? What had happened at Washita River to leave him with both physical and emotional scars? And what dark history existed between him and Grant Harrington? Most troubling of all, what awaited them in Silver Springs. By late afternoon, Emma and Isaac had navigated the treacherous Apache Trail and found themselves looking down upon Silver Springs from the northern ridge. The settlement was larger than Emma had expected. Perhaps 30 buildings clustered around a main street, with scattered homesteads dotting the surrounding valley. In the distance, smoke rose from a large structure set apart from the town. "Your sister's place," Isaac said, pointing to the homestead. "You can see the blacksmith shop from here." Emma's heart lifted at the sight. "We made it, and no sign of Harrington." "Not yet," Isaac cautioned. "Let's not celebrate until you're safely with your family." They descended carefully, approaching the homestead from the north as planned. As they drew closer, Emma could make out a modest house with a large workshop beside it. Smoke rose from both chimneys, and a small garden plot was visible near the house. When they were within hailing distance, a tall woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Even from a distance, Emma recognized her sister's slender figure. "Martha," she called, urging her horse forward. The woman's face transformed with joy. "Emma, Emma!" She rushed toward them, her skirts billowing around her legs. The sisters embraced tearfully after Emma dismounted, while Isaac stood back, holding both horses' reins, and watching the reunion with a guarded smile. Martha fussed over Lily, exclaiming at how she'd grown since the daguerreotype Emma had sent months earlier. A tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the workshop, wiping his hands on a leather apron. His powerful arms bore the distinctive muscles of a blacksmith, and his beard was neatly trimmed despite the smudges of soot on his face. "You must be Isaac Reed," he said, approaching with an extended hand. "Martha told me what you did for my sister-in-law and niece. We're in your debt, sir." Isaac shook the offered hand, studying James Townsend's face, with an intensity that made Emma curious. There seemed to be a moment of recognition between the men, though neither acknowledged it aloud. "James Townsend, I presume," Isaac said. "And there's no debt." "If you say anyone would have done the same, I might have to disagree with you," Emma interrupted, giving Isaac a knowing look. James laughed. "Come inside, both of you. You look like you've had a rough journey." As they approached the house, Isaac glanced back toward the main road with a troubled expression. Before they entered, he pulled James aside, speaking in low tones that Emma couldn't quite catch. James's jovial expression hardened, and he nodded grimly. Inside the Townsend home was warm and welcoming. Martha had prepared a hearty meal, and the conversation flowed easily as Emma recounted their harrowing journey, carefully editing the more frightening moments for her sister's benefit. "So that's why you came by the Northern Trail," Martha said, refilling Isaac's coffee cup. "We heard Harrington was in town today meeting with the mayor." James nodded. "Gordon Prescott was here earlier, more insistent than ever that we sell. Said things were about to change in Silver Springs, and we'd be wise to take his offer before it was too late." "They knew we were coming," Emma said, hugging Lily closer. "That's why they tried to get here before us." Martha looked alarmed. "What does our Emma have to do with Harrington's schemes?" "Nothing directly," Isaac explained. "But Harrington has been looking for leverage against any landowner who won't sell to him. A woman traveling alone with a baby might have provided that leverage against you." James's expression darkened further. "There's been talk in town that Harrington's brought in hired guns from Texas. 3 rough-looking men arrived on yesterday's stage." "We should get some rest," Martha said, suddenly nervous. "This isn't a conversation for tonight. Emma and Lily need sleep after their journey." Later, as Martha showed Emma to the small bedroom prepared for her, she paused at the door. "That man, Reed," she said quietly. "There's something about him." "He saved our lives, Martha," Emma replied, setting a sleeping Lily in the cradle her sister had ready. "I don't doubt his courage," Martha said. "But James recognized him somehow, though he won't say from where." She studied her sister's face. "And I see how you look at him." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's not like that. He's been nothing but honorable." Martha smiled gently. "I didn't suggest otherwise, but I know grief, Emma. When Thomas died in the war before I met James, I thought I'd never love again." She squeezed Emma's hand. "Daniel would want you to be happy." "It's too soon," Emma whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Perhaps," Martha conceded. "Just know that your heart is allowed to heal, even if the scars remain." After Martha left, Emma stood by the window looking out at the night sky. In the yard below, she could see Isaac and James deep in conversation, their faces serious in the lantern light. There was a formality to Isaac's posture now, shoulders squared, head held high, that reminded her of the military bearing he'd briefly shown on their journey. When James clapped Isaac on the shoulder with sudden warmth, Emma wondered what understanding the men had reached. More than ever, she sensed there were depths to Isaac Reed that she had yet to fathom. The town meeting the following evening drew nearly every resident of Silver Springs. Emma had insisted on attending despite Martha's concerns, leaving Lily in the care of Martha's young assistant, Sarah. "If this concerns my family, I want to be present," she'd said firmly. The town hall was packed beyond capacity when they arrived. Isaac surveyed the room with a soldier's eye, noting positions and exits. Emma observed how people seemed to divide themselves. Harrington's allies clustered near the front, while those who opposed him sat further back, speaking in hushed tones. Grant Harrington himself sat beside the mayor, his imposing figure commanding attention, even in stillness. In his 50s, with silver hair and cold eyes, he exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to power. The ornate silver-handled revolver at his hip seemed more for show than practical use, though Emma had no doubt he knew how to use it. "That's him," she whispered to Isaac, as they took seats beside James. Isaac nodded, once his face impassive, though Emma noticed how his hand stayed near his own weapon. The meeting began with routine matters, road repairs, taxes, and plans for the upcoming Founders' Day celebration. Throughout these discussions, Harrington remained silent, though his son and the hard-faced woman Emma had glimpsed at the creek occasionally spoke up. Finally, the mayor addressed the main agenda item. "Now, as you all know, there's been ongoing discussion about water rights in our county. Mr. Harrington has a proposal he'd like to present." Harrington rose, commanding the room with his physical presence alone. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice carrying easily to the back of the hall. "For years we've all struggled with the unpredictable nature of water in this territory. Floods one season, drought the next." He moved to a large map displayed on an easel. "My proposal is simple, centralized management of our water resources." A murmur ran through the crowd as Harrington continued outlining a plan that would essentially give his ranch control over the major water sources in the county, supposedly for more efficient distribution. In return for water rights, landowners would receive fair compensation and guaranteed water allocation based on their needs, Harrington explained smoothly. This would provide stability and predictability for everyone. "And who decides what's fair compensation?" a voice called from the back. "Or what our needs are?" "A committee would be formed," Harrington replied. "Representative of the community." "With you as chairman, no doubt," Isaac said, clearly rising to his feet. All eyes turned to him, including Harrington's, whose expression hardened at the interruption. For a moment, the room fell completely silent, the tension palpable. "Well," Harrington said finally, his voice dangerously soft. "Lieutenant Reed, I wasn't aware you had interests in Silver Springs." The formal military address confirmed Emma's suspicions about Isaac's past, but it was the open hostility between the men that made her breath catch. "I have interests wherever honest people are being pressured to give up their rights," Isaac replied. "This proposal is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to control everyone's livelihood." Several voices murmured in agreement, emboldened by Isaac's challenge. "Lieutenant Reed speaks out of personal animosity," Harrington said dismissively. "He's never been one to see the bigger picture." "I see the picture clearly," Isaac countered. "You've been buying or intimidating people off their land for years. Those who resist face accidents or suddenly find their markets dried up." The mayor banged his gavel. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Reed." "It's the truth." James Townsend stood beside Isaac. "My family has been pressured repeatedly to sell our spring. When we refused, our supply deliveries were mysteriously delayed, and customers were warned away from my forge." Others began to speak up. A farmer whose cattle had been scattered after refusing to sell a widow whose well had been mysteriously contaminated after declining Harrington's generous offer for her late husband's land. Emma watched as more people found the courage to share their experiences, united by the simple act of speaking aloud what had previously been whispered in fear. She saw Harrington's face darken with each new testimony, his control over the meeting, and perhaps the town, visibly slipping. "This is slander," Harrington finally thundered, silencing the room. "I've done nothing but try to improve this community, invest in its future, and this is the thanks I get." "The community doesn't need your kind of improvement, Grant," an elderly rancher called out. "We need to be left to live and work in peace." The meeting dissolved into heated debate, with the mayor struggling to maintain order. Throughout it all, Emma noticed Harrington's son whispering to the hard-faced woman, who eventually slipped out of the hall unnoticed by most. When the meeting finally adjourned, the mayor had tabled Harrington's proposal for further study, a clear setback for the powerful rancher. As people filed out, there was a new energy in the air, a sense of collective resolve that hadn't been present before. "You did well in there," Emma told Isaac as they walked back to where they'd left their horses. "We all did," Isaac replied. "It's the first time I've seen people stand up to Harrington so openly." "It may have consequences," James warned, glancing back at the town hall where Harrington remained surrounded by his supporters. "It already has," Isaac said quietly. "But staying silent has consequences too." As they rode back to the Townsend homestead under a star-filled sky, Emma found herself riding close beside Isaac. The events of the meeting had stirred something within her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since Daniel's death. This place, these people fighting for their homes and livelihoods, mattered to her. And the man riding beside her mattered most of all. When they reached the homestead, Martha was waiting anxiously on the porch, Lily asleep in her arms. "Thank goodness you're back," she said, her face tense with worry. "Gordon Prescott was here while you were gone." James immediately stiffened. "What did he want?" "He said he was just passing by, but he was asking strange questions about our property boundaries and the spring." Martha shuddered. "There was something in his manner that frightened me. I kept Lily inside and didn't invite him in." "You did right," Isaac said grimly. "Prescott's timing is no coincidence. Harrington must have had him check your defenses while we were all at the meeting." "I'll check the property," James said, reaching for a lantern. "I'll come with you," Isaac offered, and the two men set off to inspect the boundaries of the homestead, leaving Emma and Martha to settle Lily for the night. Later, as Emma rocked Lily to sleep, Martha entered with a cup of tea. "James is showing Isaac the spring," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "They've been gone a while." Emma nodded, grateful for her sister's calm presence. "Martha, what do you know about Harrington, and about Isaac's connection to him?" Martha sighed. "James won't speak of it directly, but I've gathered bits over the years. Harrington wasn't always as he is now. After the war, he was just another rancher building a spread. It was after his wife died that he began to change, buying land, pressing others to sell, growing more ruthless with each passing year. And Isaac. James served briefly in the cavalry after the war. He never talks about it, but tonight he finally admitted he knew Lieutenant Reed by reputation." Martha lowered her voice. "They called him the Judge because he served on military tribunals after the war. They say he was uncompromising but fair, even when it cost him." Emma thought of the law books in Isaac's cabin, the formal bearing that occasionally broke through his rancher's demeanor. What happened between him and Harrington? Before Martha could answer, the door opened and James entered with Isaac close behind. Both men looked grim. "Someone's been tampering with the spring," James announced without preamble. "There's evidence they were testing how to divert the water." "Harrington's not waiting for legal channels anymore," Isaac added. "He's getting desperate." "What do we do?" Martha asked, fear evident in her voice. James and Isaac exchanged looks, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, James spoke. "Isaac has offered to stay and help us defend the property." He looked at his wife. "I've accepted." Martha nodded, relief visible on her face. "Good. We need all the help we can get." That night, Emma couldn't sleep despite her exhaustion. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind: the confrontation at the meeting, the threat to her sister's home, and the growing tension between Isaac and Harrington. Rising from bed, she checked on Lily before slipping outside to get some air. The night was cool and clear, stars blazing in the velvet sky. From the direction of the spring, Emma heard low voices, James and Isaac still talking. She followed the sound, not intending to eavesdrop, but drawn by curiosity and concern. As she approached, their words became clearer. "You never told your wife you served under me at Fort Laramie," Isaac was saying. "Some memories are best left buried, sir," James replied. "Those were dark days." "I'm not your commanding officer anymore, Townsend. Just a rancher like you." James's laugh was mirthless. "We both know that's not entirely true, Judge. Not with what you know about Harrington." Emma froze, not wanting to intrude, but unable to move away. "Harrington will make his move soon," Isaac said after a pause. "Tonight was just the beginning." "Why does he hate you so much?" James asked. "It goes beyond the water rights." The silence that followed was so long Emma thought Isaac might not answer. When he did, his voice was low and heavy with the weight of old pain. "I sentenced his brother Robert to hang for war crimes at Washita River. The massacre of women and children." Emma's hand flew to her mouth to stifle her gasp. "Christ," James murmured. "I'd heard rumors, but—" "Robert Harrington was guilty. I had eyewitness testimony, including my own." Isaac's voice hardened. "What I didn't know then was that Grant was involved too. By the time I learned the truth, he'd already established himself here, made powerful friends. And he knows you know." "Yes, he's been waiting for me to make a move against him for years." A humorless laugh. "I never did because there wasn't enough proof to bring him down without destroying myself too." "What changed?" James asked. "I found something I'm willing to fight for again," Isaac replied quietly. Emma stepped back, heart pounding, and accidentally snapped a twig beneath her foot. Both men whirled toward the sound, James raising his lantern. "Emma," he called. "Is that you?" She stepped forward, reluctantly caught. "I'm sorry. I couldn't sleep and heard voices. I didn't mean to eavesdrop." Isaac's face was unreadable in the lantern light, but the rigid set of his shoulders spoke volumes. Without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the spring. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You heard." Emma nodded, watching Isaac's retreating figure. "Is it true? About Harrington's brother?" "Yes," James said grimly. "And more that wasn't said." The judge was the only officer willing to prosecute Harrington's brother despite pressure from above. It cost him his military career. He looked at Emma searchingly. "He's a good man, Emma. One of the best I've known, despite, or perhaps because of, what he's had to carry." In the distance, a warning bell began to toll from the direction of town. James straightened, alert. "Fire," he said sharply. "In Silver Springs." They turned to see an orange glow on the horizon, flames visible even at this distance. In the same moment, Isaac came running back from the darkness. "The bank," he said grimly. "Harrington's making his move." The scene in Silver Springs was chaos when they arrived. The bank building was engulfed in flames, townspeople forming a bucket line from the water trough to combat the blaze. Sheriff Burke stood watching, making little effort to organize the firefighting or investigate the cause. James immediately joined the bucket line, while Isaac surveyed the crowd. His eyes narrowed. Emma stayed with the horses, scanning for Martha, who had remained at the homestead with Lily. "Reed," Sheriff Burke approached, hand resting on his holster. "Convenient timing. You show up in town and suddenly we have trouble." "What happened, Sheriff?" Isaac asked evenly. "Robbery," Burke replied. "Someone broke in, took the cash box, then torched the place." His eyes hardened. "Funny thing, Jenkins over there says he saw a man with a scar like yours skulking around back just before the fire started." Emma's heart sank as a man in the crowd, clearly one of Harrington's men, nodded in confirmation. "That's him, Sheriff, same scar, same build. No mistaking it." "That's a lie," Emma said, stepping forward. "Isaac was at our homestead all evening." Sheriff Burke smiled coldly. "No offense, ma'am, but you're hardly an impartial witness." He turned back to Isaac. "I'm placing you under arrest for robbery and arson, Reed." "On the word of one man," Isaac challenged. "On the word of three," came Grant Harrington's voice as he emerged from the crowd. "My foreman and ranch hand both saw you as well." He approached slowly, satisfaction evident in his face. "The territorial court isn't in session for another month. You'll wait in our jail until then." James pushed through the crowd, still wet from the bucket line. "This is ridiculous, Burke. You can't arrest a man on such flimsy evidence." "I can and I will," Burke snapped, drawing his revolver. "Reed, hand over your weapons. You're coming with me." For a tense moment, Emma thought Isaac might resist. His hand hovered near his holster, his eyes locked with Harrington's. Then, with deliberate slowness, he unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to the sheriff. "James," Isaac said quietly, "get Emma home." "Isaac, no," Emma protested, but it was too late. Two deputies flanked Isaac, grabbing his arms roughly. "Townsend," Burke continued, "you're under arrest too as an accomplice." "What?" James exclaimed. "On what grounds?" "Harboring a known criminal," Burke replied smoothly, "and resistance to lawful authority." As James was disarmed and seized, Emma saw Harrington's satisfied smile. This had been his plan all along. Remove the two men most capable of opposing him, leaving the women vulnerable. "You won't get away with this," she told Harrington, her voice low but steady. Harrington regarded her with cold amusement. "My dear Mrs. Carson, I already have." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Give my regards to your sister. Tell her my offer for her land stands, for now." As Isaac and James were led away to the jailhouse, Emma felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Deputy Collins, the youngest of Burke's men, looking uncomfortable. "Get back to your sister's place, ma'am," he said quietly, "and bolt the doors tonight." The Townsend homestead was dark and silent when Emma returned. Martha met her at the door, rifle in hand, Lily sleeping in a basket nearby. "James?" Martha asked, her face falling when she saw Emma was alone. Quickly, Emma explained what had happened in town. Martha listened, her expression shifting from fear to anger to determination. "Harrington planned this perfectly," Martha said, pacing the small kitchen. "The night after the town meeting when support was building against him. Now he silences two voices of opposition and makes an example of them." "What can we do?" Emma asked. "Sheriff Burke is clearly in Harrington's pocket." Martha's eyes hardened with resolve. "First, we secure the homestead. At dawn, I'll ride to the Wilson Ranch. They've stood with us before and have 3 grown sons. Then to the Hendersons and Millers." She checked the rifle's action. "Harrington thinks women alone are easy targets. He's about to learn differently." Through the night, the sisters took turns standing watch. Emma found herself by the window at midnight, the derringer Isaac had given her resting in her palm. In the moonlight, she could see the spring that Harrington coveted so desperately, a small pool of silver surrounded by cottonwoods feeding the creek that sustained so many downstream. She thought of Isaac in the town jail, imprisoned for a crime he hadn't committed. The military judge who had sacrificed his career for justice, only to face injustice himself. And she thought of what James had said, that Isaac had found something worth fighting for again. Had he meant her and Lily? The question lingered in her mind until dawn, when Martha prepared to ride for help. As her sister saddled her horse, Emma made a decision. "I'm coming with you," she announced. "Joe Quinn taught me how to find Isaac's ranch. His hand might help us." Martha shook her head. "Someone needs to stay with Lily." "We'll take her with us," Emma insisted. "It's not safe here alone." Before Martha could argue further, they heard hoofbeats approaching, not from the direction of town, but from the north. Both women grabbed rifles, taking cover behind the water trough. To their astonishment, it was Joe Quinn who rode into view, leading a pack-horse laden with supplies. "Senoritas," he called, raising his hands when he saw the rifles. "It is only old Joe, Mr. Quinn." Emma lowered her weapon, relief flooding through her. "How did you know to come?" The old ranch hand dismounted stiffly. "The Apache have ways of knowing," he said cryptically. "I dreamed of trouble, and the red bandana turned black." He nodded toward Emma's arm where Sarah's bandana was still tied. "Where is Senor Reed?" Quickly, they explained the situation. Joe's weathered face grew grave as he listened. "Harrington has gone too far this time," he said, his accent thickening with anger. "But he has not yet won." He turned to his pack-horse, untying a small leather pouch. "Before you left, Senor Reed gave me instructions if trouble came." From the pouch he withdrew a small brass key. "This opens a box beneath the floorboards of the spring house. Inside are papers, evidence against Harrington that the judge has collected for years." Emma's eyes widened. "Evidence of what? War crimes, stolen gold, murders covered up." Joe's voice was grim. "Enough to hang Harrington 10 times over." Hope surged through Emma. "Then we can free Isaac and James." "Not so simple, Senorita," Joe cautioned. The evidence must reach the territorial marshal in Prescott. Harrington controls the roads. He has men watching. Then we find another way, Martha said firmly. But first we need to see what's in that box. The spring house was a small stone structure built over the main spring to protect it from contamination. Inside, the water bubbled up crystal clear into a stone basin before flowing out to form the creek. The air was cool and damp, filled with the gentle music of flowing water. Following Joe's directions, they pried up a loose floorboard near the back wall. Beneath it lay a tin box rusted at the corners but secure. The brass key turned with difficulty, but the lock eventually yielded. Inside were bundles of papers carefully preserved, military reports, sworn statements, maps marked with locations of ambushes and massacres. Most damning was a leather-bound journal with the initials R.H., Robert Harrington Grant's brother. These detail war crimes committed by the Harrington brothers during and after the war, Emma said, scanning the documents with growing horror. Attacks on civilian settlements, theft of army payrolls, murders disguised as Indian raids. And this, Joe said, pointing to a map with a location marked in red, shows where they hid the stolen gold. On Harrington's land. Martha looked up sharply. If the territorial marshal had these documents, Harrington would hang, Joe finished grimly. But the marshal is in Prescott, 3 days hard ride, and Harrington controls the telegraph office. Then someone must take these to Prescott, Emma said, determination hardening in her voice. Too dangerous, Martha protested. Harrington's men watch all the roads. Joe Quinn stroked his silver mustache thoughtfully. Not all roads, he pointed to the map. There is a way through Apache country. Old trails known to few whites. Dangerous, yes, but Harrington would never think to watch there. Could you guide someone? Emma asked. Joe's eyes met hers, understanding dawning. Señorita Emma, you cannot be thinking. I am, she said firmly. Martha can organize the townspeople while I take these documents to Prescott. Absolutely not, Martha said, aghast. You have Lily to think of. Lily will stay with you, Emma replied. Joe will guide me. We'll travel faster alone. And if you're caught, Martha demanded, what happens to Lily then? Emma thought of Isaac imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, of James, who had welcomed her family without hesitation, of the community fighting for their homes against a tyrant. If we do nothing, Harrington wins, she said quietly. Isaac and James hang for a crime they didn't commit. He takes your land, controls the water, and ruins more lives. She touched the red bandana on her arm. I won't let that happen. Martha studied her sister's face, seeing a determination that hadn't been there when Emma arrived. Finally, she nodded. 2 days, she said. If we haven't heard from you in 2 days, I'll find another way to get help. As they prepared for the journey, gathering supplies and planning their route, Joe approached Emma privately. Señorita, he said softly, there is something else you should know about the judge. Emma paused in her preparations. What is it? The scar on his face. It was not from battle with Indians, as many believe. Joe's eyes were solemn. It was from Grant Harrington himself, the day the judge sentenced Robert to hang. Grant attacked him with a knife, swearing vengeance on all the judge held dear. Emma's hand went instinctively to the bandana. That's why Isaac lives so alone, so isolated. Joe nodded. Everyone he allowed close became a target, until you and the Nina. He handed Emma a small bundle wrapped in leather. His cavalry pistol. He would want you to have it. The weight of the revolver in her hands felt like a sacred trust. This was no longer just about saving Isaac and James. It was about justice, long-delayed wrongs finally being righted. We leave at dusk, she decided. The darkness will cover our departure. While Emma and Joe prepared for their dangerous journey, Isaac and James sat in adjacent cells in the Silver Springs jail. The building was little more than a wooden shack, with iron bars, poorly constructed and minimally guarded, usually sufficient for holding drunks and petty thieves until they sobered up. "They'll come for us tonight," James said quietly, watching the single deputy doze at his desk. "Harrington won't risk a proper trial, even a rigged one." Isaac nodded grimly. "Burke will claim we tried to escape. 2 convenient graves by morning." "Martha won't sell even if they kill me," James said with certainty. "She's stronger than Harrington knows." "So is Emma," Isaac replied, thinking of her steady hands on the derringer, her courage in the flood. "But strength alone won't stop Harrington." James studied his former commanding officer. "You've been gathering evidence against him, haven't you? That's why you settled nearby, stayed all these years." Isaac was silent for a long moment. "After Sarah and Elizabeth died, vengeance was all I had left. Then it became about justice." He met James's eyes. "I hid the evidence at your spring house. If Emma finds it, she will," James said confidently. "Martha knows every inch of our land." "Then there's hope," Isaac said, though his voice held little of it. He touched the empty holster where his revolver had been. "I just hope they're careful. Harrington is most dangerous when cornered." Their conversation was interrupted by the jailhouse door swinging open. Sheriff Burke entered, followed by Harrington himself and 2 of his men. "Well, gentlemen," Harrington said, removing his gloves deliberately, "I thought we might have a private conversation before your transfer to the territorial prison tomorrow." Isaac stood slowly moving to the bars of his cell. "There won't be any transfer, will there, Grant? Just 2 bodies found somewhere convenient." Harrington smiled thinly. "Always the clever one, Reed. Always seeing through the facade to the ugly truth." He stepped closer to the cell. "That was always your problem. Some truths aren't meant to be spoken." "Like the truth about what you and Robert did at Washita," Isaac challenged, "or the army payroll you stole, or the homesteaders you murdered to build your empire." A flash of genuine rage crossed Harrington's face. "My brother died because of your righteousness. Hanged like a common criminal while you watched." "He was a criminal," Isaac replied evenly. "He ordered the murder of women and children. I gave him a soldier's death, which was more than he deserved." Harrington's control slipped, his voice rising. "And what do you deserve, Judge, for destroying my family, for hounding me all these years?" He composed himself with visible effort. "No matter. By this time tomorrow, the last loose end will be tied up. If you harm Emma or Martha," James began lunging at the bars. "Mrs. Townsend has until noon tomorrow to sign over her water rights," Harrington cut in smoothly. "As for Mrs. Carson and her child, accidents happen to travelers all the time in this territory." Isaac's face went deadly calm, a stillness that made even Harrington take a step back. "Touch them, and there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in." Harrington recovered his composure, laughing softly. "Bold words from a man behind bars." He nodded to Burke. "Make sure they're secure. No visitors, no messages." As Harrington turned to leave, he paused at the door. "One last chance, Reed. Tell me where you've hidden the evidence you've been collecting, and perhaps Mrs. Carson and her baby might survive their journey home." Isaac met his eyes steadily. "There is no evidence, Grant. Just your guilty conscience." "We both know that's a lie," Harrington replied coldly. "But no matter. My men are searching the Townsend property as we speak." They'll find whatever you've hidden." He donned his hat. "Sleep well, gentlemen. It will be your last night on Earth." After they left, James slumped onto his bunk. "They're at the homestead now. Martha, Emma, the baby. Joe Quinn is there by now," Isaac said with quiet certainty, "and your wife is no helpless flower." "And yours?" James asked softly. "Mrs. Carson has courage, but courage isn't always enough against men like Harrington." Isaac didn't correct the assumption about his relationship with Emma. "She's smarter than Harrington gives her credit for, and she has something he doesn't." "What's that?" Isaac's smile was grim. "Nothing left to lose." The sunset painted the desert in shades of fire as Emma and Joe made final preparations for their journey. Martha had packed provisions, jerky, hardtack coffee, and filled their canteens from the spring. Joe had selected their horses carefully, not the fastest, but the surest-footed for the mountain trails ahead. Emma had changed into men's clothing, James's old trousers and shirt, for easier riding. Her hair was tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, the red bandana now serving as a neckerchief. Isaac's cavalry revolver hung at her hip, loaded and ready. "Remember," Martha instructed, "follow the North Star until you reach Apache Pass, then east to Prescott." She hugged her sister fiercely. 2 days. If you're not back with help by then, you'll do what needs doing," Emma finished. She knelt beside Lily, sleeping peacefully in her basket. "Mama will be back soon, little one," she whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. The sound of approaching riders shattered the moment. Joe, who had been watching the road, rushed to them. "Harrington's men," he warned. "6 riders coming fast." Martha grabbed her rifle. "Go now. Take the back trail. I'll hold them off." "Martha, go," her sister insisted. "This is our only chance." Emma mounted quickly, Joe already astride his horse. With a last look at her sister standing defiantly before the homestead, rifle raised, Emma spurred her horse toward the shadowed hills. They had barely reached the tree line when gunshots echoed from the homestead. Emma reined in, turning back. "No, señorita," Joe urged. "We cannot help her by dying ourselves." Emma hesitated, torn between her sister and her mission. Another volley of shots decided her, these coming from multiple rifles. Martha wasn't alone. The neighbors had come. "Lead on," she told Joe, determination hardening her voice, "to Prescott." As they rode into the gathering darkness, Emma thought of Isaac in his cell, James beside him, both men awaiting an execution disguised as justice. She thought of Martha, defending their home of Lily, who deserved a future free from tyrants like Harrington. And she thought of Daniel, who had taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. The tin box of evidence was secure in her saddlebag, its weight both burden and promise. Justice long denied might finally be served. If they could survive the journey through Apache territory, if they could reach Prescott in time, if the marshal believed their evidence. Too many ifs to count, but Emma pushed them aside. One certain truth remained. Grant Harrington had underestimated her. He saw only a widow with a baby, not a woman who had already survived the worst life could offer. Behind them, more gunshots echoed from the homestead, and flames rose against the darkening sky. The Apache trails were nearly invisible in the darkness, mere suggestions of paths winding through rocky canyons and sparse juniper forests. Joe Quinn led with the confidence of a man returning to familiar territory, occasionally murmuring to himself in his mother's Chiricahua tongue. Emma followed closely, every sense alert. The tin box of evidence pressed against her side, with each movement of the horse a constant reminder of their mission's importance. They had been riding for hours, stopping only to rest the horses, pushing deeper into territory few white settlers ever entered. "We must stop soon," Joe said as the eastern sky began to lighten. "The horses need rest, and we must travel by night through this land." Emma nodded reluctantly. As much as she wanted to press on, she knew Joe was right. How much farther to Prescott? "If we ride hard, we can reach the settlement by tomorrow night," Joe replied. "But first, we must pass through Shadow Canyon. The Apache avoid it. They say spirits dwell there." He guided them to a sheltered overhang where a small spring trickled from the rock face. After seeing to the horses, Joe built a tiny smokeless fire while Emma spread their bedrolls. "You should sleep, señorita," Joe said, settling cross-legged beside the fire. "I will keep watch." Emma was too keyed up for sleep. She sat beside the old ranch hand, accepting the cup of strong coffee he offered. "Tell me about Isaac," she said quietly. "How did you come to work for him?" Joe's weathered face softened in the firelight. "After my son died, I had nothing. I drank, fought, waited to die." He touched the cross hanging at his neck. "One day in a saloon, 3 men decided the half-breed had lived too long. They were beating me when the judge intervened. Isaac fought them." Joe shook his head. "He offered them money to stop. When they refused, then he fought." A smile creased his leathery face. 3 against 1, but they had no chance. Afterward, he took me to his ranch, gave me work purpose." His dark eyes met Emma's. "He saved my life, as he saved yours." "He seems to make a habit of that," Emma said softly. "The judge carries many ghosts," Joe continued. "His wife and child, the men he sentenced, the battles he fought." He poked at the fire. "For years, he lived only to bring Harrington to justice, until you and the Nina came." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're nothing to him beyond a responsibility." Joe's knowing smile made her look away. "The judge does not give his wife's bandana to responsibilities, señorita." As dawn broke fully, they extinguished their small fire and concealed all signs of their passage. Emma tried to sleep while Joe kept watch, but her mind churned with worries. Had Martha successfully defended the homestead? Were Isaac and James still alive? Would they reach Prescott in time? When she finally drifted off, her dreams were chaotic. Floodwaters rising, Lily crying, Isaac reaching for her but always just beyond her grasp. Joe woke her at dusk. "We must move," he said urgently. "Riders on our trail." Emma was instantly alert. "Harrington's men. 3 riders following our sign." Joe was already saddling the horses. "They are not Apache. Too noisy, too careless." They mounted quickly, leaving the shelter of the overhang to ride deeper into the increasingly rugged terrain. The trails narrowed, winding through box canyons and across rocky plateaus where a misstep could mean disaster. "Shadow Canyon lies ahead," Joe said as full darkness descended. "We must cross it before moonrise." The canyon mouth loomed before them, a slash of deeper darkness against the night sky. As they entered, the temperature dropped noticeably and the silence was absolute. No insects chirping, no night birds calling. "Why do the Apache avoid this place?" Emma whispered, feeling a primal unease. "Many winters ago, a band of Apache was trapped here by soldiers," Joe replied, his voice equally hushed. "None survived. They say the spirits remain, seeking vengeance." Emma was not normally superstitious, but something about the oppressive silence made the hairs on her neck rise. Their horses sensed it too, moving nervously, ears flicking back and forth. Halfway through the canyon, Joe suddenly reined in, raising his hand for silence. In the distance, Emma could hear the faint echo of hoofbeats. "They've followed us into the canyon," Joe whispered. "We must hurry." They urged their horses forward, moving as quickly as they dared on the treacherous path. The canyon walls rose higher on either side, hemming them in, offering few options for escape if they were overtaken. The path ahead split suddenly, one trail continuing through the canyon, another climbing steeply up the wall toward a narrow ledge. "Which way?" Emma asked urgently. Joe hesitated only a moment. "Up. We can defend from above, if needed." The climb was heart-stopping. Loose rocks skittering beneath the horses' hooves, the path barely wide enough for them to pass. Emma didn't dare look down, focusing instead on Joe's back as he led the way. They reached the ledge just as moonlight spilled into the canyon, illuminating 3 riders below. Emma recognized Prescott's lanky form and the distinctive silhouette of Harrington's foreman. "They'll see our tracks," she whispered. "They'll know we came this way." Joe nodded grimly, drawing his rifle. "Stay back against the wall. I will deal with them." "No," Emma said firmly, drawing Isaac's cavalry revolver. "We do this together." Below, the pursuers had indeed discovered their trail and were beginning the ascent. Joe aimed carefully at the path ahead of them, not at the men themselves, and fired. The shot echoed deafeningly through the canyon. Fragments of rock exploded from the trail, startling the pursuers' horses. One reared, nearly unseating its rider. "Next shot won't miss," Joe called down. "Turn back." "Mrs. Carson," Prescott's voice floated up. "We know it's you. Harrington sent us to help you. It's not safe out here." "I don't need Harrington's help," Emma replied coldly. "Tell him I know the truth about him and his brother. Tell him justice is coming." A volley of bullets was their answer, ricocheting off the canyon walls around them. Emma and Joe pressed themselves against the rock face for protection. "We can't stay here," Joe muttered. "They'll wait us out, or circle behind." Emma peered over the edge. In the moonlight, she could see Prescott conferring with the others. One was already turning back, presumably to find another way up. "Can we go higher?" she asked. Joe nodded toward a narrow crack in the wall behind them. "That leads to the rim, but it's a hard climb, especially in darkness." "We have no choice," Emma said, already dismounting. "We'll have to leave the horses." Joe quickly transferred their vital supplies to packs they could carry: water, food, and most importantly, the tin box of evidence. He whispered something to the horses in Apache, then slapped their flanks, sending them galloping back down the ledge toward the pursuing riders. The ensuing confusion bought them precious minutes. Emma and Joe slipped into the narrow crack, beginning the grueling climb toward the canyon rim. The fissure was barely wide enough for their bodies, forcing them to inch upward, using elbows, knees, and toes to brace against the rock. Emma's muscles screamed with the effort, her hands bloody from the sharp stone. But she pushed onward. Above her, Joe moved with surprising agility for his age, occasionally reaching down to help her past difficult sections. When they finally hauled themselves over the rim, dawn was breaking. They lay exhausted on the rocky ground, gasping for breath, listening for sounds of pursuit. "They won't follow us this way," Joe said between breaths. "Too difficult. They'll try to circle around, cut us off before Prescott." Emma sat up, wincing at her torn and bleeding hands. "How far now? 20 miles? Perhaps more." Joe looked grim. "Without horses, a long walk." Emma thought of Isaac and James in their cells, of Martha defending the homestead of Lily, waiting for her return. "Then we'd better start walking." In Silver Springs, Isaac and James sat in their cells watching the sun rise through the small barred window. Neither had slept much, knowing what dawn likely meant for them. "Sheriff's late," James observed. "Usually he's here by now to make his rounds." Isaac nodded his mind on Emma and Martha. Had they found the evidence? Had they escaped Harrington's men? The uncertainty was worse than facing his own likely death. The jailhouse door finally opened, but it wasn't Sheriff Burke who entered. Deputy Collins stepped in nervously, checking over his shoulder before approaching the cells. "They're planning to move you at noon," he said in a low voice. "Burke and Harrington's men. Taking you to the territorial prison, they say." "A bullet in the back during an escape attempt," Isaac translated grimly. Collins nodded, looking miserable. "I didn't sign up for murder." "Then help us," James urged. "You have the keys." The young deputy shook his head. "Burke would hunt me down." "But—" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "Word from your place, Townsend. Your wife and the others drove off Harrington's men last night. Mrs. Carson and the old Mexican headed for Prescott with some papers." Hope flared in Isaac's chest. "They found the evidence. Harrington knows," Collins continued urgently. "Sent Prescott and 2 others after them. And he's moving up your transfer. They'll be here within the hour." The deputy glanced nervously at the door again. "That's all I can do. I'm sorry." He started to leave, then turned back. "Also, there's talk in town. People gathering at the Wilson place. Not everyone believes you robbed that bank." After Collins left, Isaac paced his small cell. Emma and Joe are out there alone with Harrington's men, hunting them. "Martha and the neighbors held the homestead," James reminded him, "and Joe knows every trail in the territory. If they reach Territorial Marshal Davis with that evidence—" Isaac let the thought hang unfinished. "Then Harrington hangs," James completed, "and we're free men, if we live that long." Isaac went to the window, staring at the distant hills. "Emma will make it," he said with quiet certainty. "She's stronger than Harrington knows." The sun beat down mercilessly as Emma and Joe made their way across the high desert plateau. Without horses, they were forced to travel by day, exposed to the heat and any watching eyes. They rationed their water carefully, knowing it had to last until they reached the next water source. By midday, exhaustion began to take its toll. Joe's steps faltered. His breathing labored. Emma noticed with concern how he pressed his hand to his side, wincing. "We should rest," she suggested, guiding him to the shade of a large boulder. "No time," Joe insisted, though he sank gratefully into the shade. "Prescott will have circled around by now, likely waiting ahead." Emma handed him the canteen. "Then we need another route." Joe took a small sip, then pointed to a distant mesa. "Beyond that lies Prescott, but between here and there—" he gestured to the vast open landscape they would need to cross. "No cover, nowhere to hide." Emma studied the terrain, an idea forming. What if we don't try to hide? What if we walk straight and bold as brass? Joe looked at her quizzically. "Harrington's men will be watching the trails, the approaches from the wilderness," Emma explained. "Not the main road into town. If we could reach it—" "The stage road is 5 miles west," Joe said, understanding dawning. "But crossing open country to reach it is still safer than trying to sneak through 20 miles of territory where they're hunting us," Emma finished. Joe considered, then nodded slowly. "Bold plan, señorita. Worthy of the judge himself." They rested until the worst heat of the day passed, then set out toward the stage road. The going was difficult. Rocky terrain that tore at their boots, sparse vegetation offering little shade. Joe struggled increasingly, though he tried to hide it. When they finally reached the road as the sun was setting, Emma felt a surge of hope. Wheel ruts in the hard-packed dirt showed recent travel. If they were lucky, they might encounter a stage or freight wagon willing to give them a ride. They had walked barely a mile when Joe stumbled, catching himself against a boulder. "Joe!" Emma rushed to his side, alarmed at the gray pallor of his skin. "Old wound." He gasped, his hand pressed to his side. "From Mexican wars. Sometimes it bleeds inside." He slid down to sit against the rock. "You must go on without me, señorita. Take the evidence. I will follow when I can." "I'm not leaving you," Emma said firmly, though fear clutched at her heart. Without Joe, how would she find her way? How would she convince the marshal to believe her story? "You must," Joe insisted. "For the judge, for your Nina." He pressed Isaac's cavalry revolver into her hand. "I will slow you down. Harrington's men will catch us both." The truth of his words was undeniable, but still Emma hesitated. "I'll send help back for you." Joe nodded, though they both knew it might be too late. With trembling hands he removed the cross from around his neck, pressing it into Emma's palm alongside the gun. "For protection," he said simply. "Tell the judge. Tell him Joe Quinn died free." Tears blurred Emma's vision as she embraced the old ranch hand. Then, with the tin box secured in her pack and Joe's cross around her neck, she continued along the stage road alone. Night fell, bringing cooler air, but new dangers. Emma kept to the side of the road, ready to dive for cover at the first sound of approaching riders. Her body ached with exhaustion, her torn hands throbbing, but she pushed onward, one foot in front of the other. The moon rose, illuminating the road ahead. In its silver light, Emma saw dust rising in the distance, riders approaching fast from the direction of Prescott. She ducked behind a large sagebrush, heart pounding as she drew Isaac's revolver. The riders drew closer, 3 men moving at a gallop. Not Harrington's men, she realized with relief, but soldiers in Union blue. Emma stepped onto the road, waving her arms. "Help, please!" The soldiers reined in, hands moving to their weapons until they saw it was a woman who had hailed them. "Ma'am?" The lead rider, a young lieutenant, dismounted cautiously. "Are you all right? What are you doing out here, alone?" "I need to reach Territorial Marshal Davis in Prescott," Emma said urgently. "I have evidence of crimes committed by Grant Harrington of Silver Springs." The lieutenant exchanged glances with his companions. "We're riding from Prescott, ma'am. Marshal Davis left yesterday for Silver Springs. Received a telegraph about trouble brewing there." Emma's hopes soared. "Then he's on his way to Silver Springs now." "Yes, ma'am. Should arrive by tomorrow morning." The lieutenant studied her disheveled appearance with concern. "You look like you've had a rough journey. We can escort you back to Prescott if you need medical attention." "No," Emma said firmly. "I need to get back to Silver Springs. 2 innocent men's lives depend on it." She indicated the road behind the soldiers. "There's an injured man about 2 miles back, Joe Quinn. He needs help." The lieutenant nodded to one of his men, who immediately turned his horse and rode back the way they had come. "I can give you a mount, ma'am, but we're under orders to continue our patrol." "Just the horse is enough," Emma assured him. "And if you encounter any of Harrington's men on the road, remember, they're likely wanted for multiple crimes." Minutes later, Emma was mounted on an army horse, the tin box of evidence secure in her saddlebag, riding hard toward Silver Springs. If the marshal was already on his way there, she might yet arrive in time to save Isaac and James. The transfer to Territorial Prison never happened. By mid-morning, the streets of Silver Springs were filling with people, ranchers, shopkeepers, homesteaders, gathering outside the jailhouse with grim determination. From their cell window, Isaac and James watched in amazement as Martha Townsend and Sarah Wilson organized the crowd, distributing rifles and positioning men at strategic points around the building. "Your wife is quite the general," Isaac observed, genuine admiration in his voice. James smiled proudly. "She comes from fighting stock. Her father was at Shiloh." Sheriff Burke paced the jailhouse, nervously peering out at the growing crowd. "This is your doing, Reed," he accused. "Stirring up decent folks against lawful authority." "Those decent folks know what Harrington is," Isaac replied calmly. "They've just found the courage to stand against him." The standoff continued through the morning. Burke sent for Harrington, but the rancher was nowhere to be found. By noon, the crowd had swelled to include nearly everyone in Silver Springs not directly in Harrington's employ. "Bring out Reed and Townsend," came the call from outside. "No transfer today." Burke fingered his revolver nervously. "I've got my orders." "Your orders came from a criminal, not the law," Isaac said quietly. "Think carefully about which side of this you want to be on when it ends." Before Burke could respond, a commotion arose outside. The crowd parted to reveal a man on horseback, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the distinctive badge of the territorial marshal. "Davis," Isaac breathed hope-kindling for the first time. Marshal William Davis dismounted before the jailhouse, addressing the crowd with the natural authority of a man accustomed to command. Within minutes, he was inside the jailhouse, regarding Sheriff Burke with cold disdain. "I've received some disturbing reports about Silver Springs, Sheriff," Davis said, "particularly concerning Grant Harrington and yourself." Burke blustered. "These men are criminals. Bank robbery, arson. Convenient crimes," Davis cut in, "with no witnesses except Harrington's men." He turned to Isaac. "Lieutenant Reed, it's been some years." Isaac nodded. "Marshal, you're a welcome sight." "I'd imagine so." Davis turned back to Burke. "Open these cells, Sheriff, now." As Burke reluctantly complied, the marshal continued, "I received a telegraph from Deputy Collins yesterday. Quite an interesting tale. Then 3 Army patrolmen brought in additional reports of Harrington's men pursuing a woman and an elderly Mexican across Apache territory." His eyes narrowed. "Where is Grant Harrington, Sheriff?" Before Burke could answer, the jailhouse door burst open. Emma Carson stood in the doorway, dusty and bloodied, but triumphant, the tin box clutched in her hands. "I can answer that, Marshal," she said, "and I have the evidence to bring him to justice." Isaac stared at her in disbelief, his heart swelling with emotions too complex to name. She had done it, crossed dangerous territory, outmaneuvered Harrington's men, and returned with the proof he'd spent years gathering. As James rushed to embrace Martha, who had followed Emma inside, Isaac approached Emma slowly, almost reverently. "You made it," he said softly. Emma held out the tin box. "Joe Quinn helped me. Her voice faltered. "He stayed behind so I could go on. He was injured." Isaac's face darkened with concern. "Where is he now?" "Army Patrol found him," Emma assured him. "They're bringing him to Prescott for medical care." She hesitated, then added, "He wanted you to know he died free." Isaac's hand closed over hers on the tin box, his fingers warm and strong. "He's not dead yet. Joe's survived worse." Marshal Davis cleared his throat. "I need to see this evidence. Then we'll need to find Harrington before he flees the territory." "He won't flee," Isaac said with certainty. "He'll make one last attempt to destroy the evidence and anyone who knows about it." He looked at Emma. "Which means you're still in danger." Emma straightened her shoulders, the red bandana still tied at her throat. "I've faced worse than Grant Harrington these past days." Before Isaac could respond, gunshots erupted outside the jailhouse. Through the window, They could see Harrington and his remaining men charging into town, guns blazing. "It seems," Marshal Davis said grimly, drawing his revolver, "that Harrington has come to us." Bullets splintered the jailhouse windows as Harrington and his men laid down covering fire. Marshal Davis and Isaac took position on either side of the doorway, assessing the situation. 6 men, including Harrington, Davis noted grimly. "They've got townsfolk pinned down behind the water trough and mercantile." Isaac nodded, his mind racing through strategies. "They'll try to burn us out. It's what Harrington did to the Apache villages during the war." "We need to get the women to safety," James said, pulling Martha away from the window. Emma shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving. Not until this is finished." The cavalry revolver was steady in her hand, her eyes fixed on Isaac with quiet determination. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared purpose that went beyond words. Isaac nodded once, accepting her decision. "Burke," Marshal Davis barked at the sheriff who cowered behind his desk. "There's a back door to this place, through the cells," Burke admitted reluctantly. "For emergencies." "This qualifies," Davis said dryly. "Townsend, get your wife and Mrs. Carson out that way. Circle around to the livery stable. High ground, good cover." "I can help from there," Emma said, checking the revolver's chambers. "I know," Isaac replied simply. The confidence in his voice steadied her more than any reassurance could have. As James led Martha and Emma through the cells toward the rear exit, Isaac turned to Davis. "Grant Harrington's mine," he said quietly. The marshal studied him for a moment. "This isn't about vengeance, Reed. It's about justice. 15 years ago, I sentenced his brother to hang for justice," Isaac replied, his voice hardening. "I've spent every day since then gathering evidence against Grant for the same reason. I don't want vengeance. I want him to face a proper tribunal for his crimes." Davis nodded, satisfied. "Then let's make sure he lives to stand trial." Outside, Harrington's voice boomed across the street. "Reed, I know you're in there with that Carson woman. Send her out with the evidence, or we burn this town to the ground." Isaac moved to the window, careful to stay out of the line of fire. "It's over. Harrington Marshal Davis has the evidence. Your men are deserting. Surrender now." Harrington's laugh was bitter. "Always the righteous one, eh? Judge, I still hold this town. Your precious evidence means nothing if you're all dead." As if to emphasize his point, one of Harrington's men tossed a flaming bottle toward the jailhouse. It shattered against the wall, liquid fire spreading rapidly up the dry wooden boards. "We need to move," Davis said, coughing, as smoke began to fill the room. "Burke, you're with us. Your chance to choose the right side." The 3 men made their way through the cells, escaping through the back door just as flames engulfed the front of the jailhouse. They emerged into an alley, the sounds of gunfire still echoing from the main street. "The bank," Isaac said, orienting himself. "We can circle around through the back lots." They moved quickly, staying low, using the outbuildings for cover. As they approached the rear of the bank, they heard glass shattering and saw 2 of Harrington's men breaking in through a back window. "The evidence," Isaac realized. "It's in the marshal's saddlebags inside." Without hesitation, Davis stepped into the open, his badge catching the sunlight. "Federal marshals, stand down!" The men whirled, guns raised. Burke, in an unexpected moment of courage, fired first, hitting one squarely in the shoulder. The second man got off a wild shot before Isaac's bullet caught him in the leg. "Secure them," Davis ordered Burke, who seemed shocked by his own action. "Reed with me. Harrington will be heading for the livery stables." Isaac's blood ran cold at the thought. "Emma and Martha are there." They ran toward the livery, the smoke from the burning jailhouse now billowing black against the clear blue sky. Gunfire continued to echo sporadically, townsfolk fighting back against Harrington's remaining men. As they approached the stables, Isaac saw James crouched behind a water trough, exchanging fire with someone inside the livery. Martha was nowhere to be seen. "Townsend," Isaac called, sliding into position beside him. "Where's Emma?" James nodded toward the stable's hayloft. "Up there with Martha." They were providing cover when Harrington and his foreman broke in from the back. Isaac's jaw tightened. "Emma and Martha are inside, with Harrington." "They were in the loft," James said, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. "I haven't heard anything from them since Harrington entered." Davis joined them, assessing the situation quickly. "Frontal assault is suicide. We need another way in." Isaac studied the livery's layout, remembering its construction from his previous visits to town. "There's a loading door on the eastern side for bringing in hay. It might be unguarded." "I'll create a distraction," James offered. "Draw their fire to the front, while you two circle around." Davis nodded approval. "Good man. On my signal." As James prepared to provide cover, Isaac found himself oddly calm. The fear for Emma's safety was there, pulsing beneath the surface, but overlaid with a cold, tactical clarity he hadn't felt since his military days. Emma had risked everything to bring Harrington to justice. He would not fail her now. Davis raised his hand, then dropped it sharply. James immediately laid down a barrage of covering fire, forcing Harrington's foreman to duck behind the livery's front doors. Isaac and Davis sprinted toward the eastern side of the building, keeping low, using a row of barrels for cover. The loading door was indeed unguarded, secured only by a simple latch. Isaac eased it open, wincing at the slight creak of hinges. Inside, the livery was dim after the bright sunlight, the air thick with the smell of hay and horses. From somewhere above came the sound of voices, a man's angry growl, and a woman's defiant response. "Emma." Isaac signaled to Davis, pointing upward toward the hayloft. The marshal nodded, taking position to cover the main floor, while Isaac located the ladder. He ascended silently, years of military training guiding his movements. At the top he paused, listening intently. "Doesn't matter now," Harrington was saying, his voice tight with fury. "The evidence is burning with the jailhouse. Your word against mine, and in this territory, my word is law." "Not anymore," came Emma's clear reply. "The people know the truth now. They've seen your true face." "The people," Harrington spat. "Sheep who need a shepherd. Once Reed and the marshal are dead, they'll fall in line again." Isaac reached the edge of the hayloft, peering carefully over. Harrington stood with his back to the ladder, his silver-handled revolver trained on Emma, who stood protectively in front of Martha. The tin box of evidence was clutched in Martha's hands. "Your sister's spring, Mrs. Carson," Harrington continued. "That's all this was ever about. Water in this territory means power. Reed understood that, why he built his ranch near the creek crossing. Strategic, mind the judge." There was reluctant admiration in his voice. "If he hadn't been so rigid about his precious principles, we might have been allies." "You murdered innocent people," Emma said coldly. "Women and children at Washita River, homesteaders who refused to sell. There could never be an alliance with a man like you." Harrington's laugh was bitter. "And Reed's hands are clean. Ask him about Willow Creek. Ask him about the Comanche children. We all did what was necessary in those days." "The difference," Isaac said, stepping onto the hayloft floor, his revolver aimed squarely at Harrington's back, "is that I've spent every day since trying to make amends. You just kept killing." Harrington froze but didn't turn. "Judge Reed," he said softly. always arriving at the last moment to save the innocent. His shoulders straightened. But not this time. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Harrington spun his revolver, swinging toward Isaac. Emma lunged forward, knocking his arm upward just as he fired. The bullet splintered a beam above Isaac's head as he steadied his aim. "Drop it, Grant," Isaac ordered. "It's over." For a heartbeat, defiance blazed in Harrington's eyes. Then, with eerie calm, he lowered his gun. "You're right, Reed," he said quietly. "It is over." In a lightning move, Harrington raised his revolver again, not toward Isaac or the women, but to his own temple. "No!" Isaac lunged forward, but it was too late. The gunshot echoed through the livery, startling the horses below into frightened whinnies. Harrington crumpled to the hay-strewn floor, the silver-handled revolver falling from his lifeless hand. Silence descended, broken only by Martha's quiet sobbing. Emma stood frozen, her face pale with shock. Isaac crossed to her, gently taking her arm. "Emma," he said softly, "are you hurt?" She shook her head mutely, then suddenly collapsed against him, the strength that had carried her through so much finally giving way. Isaac held her steady, one arm around her waist, the other still gripping his revolver. "He chose the coward's way," Marshal Davis said, climbing into the loft, "rather than face justice for his crimes." "Or perhaps," Isaac replied, looking down at Harrington's body. In his mind, this was justice, the only kind he understood. Damn. The days that followed brought rapid changes to Silver Springs. With Harrington's death and the evidence against him made public, his empire quickly crumbled. Sheriff Burke resigned in disgrace, replaced temporarily by Deputy Collins, until proper elections could be held. Marshal Davis took Prescott and the remaining conspirators to Prescott for trial. The Townsend homestead became a gathering place for the community as they worked to rebuild what Harrington had destroyed. James's forge operated day and night, repairing tools and fashioning new hinges for burned buildings. Martha organized the women of Silver Springs to provide food and care for those who had lost homes in the conflict. Emma found herself at the center of it all, respected for her courage in bringing the evidence to light. She established a small school in the Townsend's front room, teaching the children of Silver Springs, while plans were made for a proper schoolhouse. Lily became the beloved mascot of the community, passed from arms to arms as the women worked. Through it all, Isaac remained helping with the rebuilding, offering quiet counsel when needed, but mostly watching Emma with a patience born of long solitude. Word came from Prescott that Joe Quinn was recovering slowly but steadily. "Too stubborn to die," the doctor had written. "Says he has unfinished business with a certain judge." A week after Harrington's death, Isaac found Emma at the spring, watching the clear water bubble up from the earth. Lily slept peacefully in a basket beside her Joe's red cloth doll clutched in her tiny hand. "You're leaving," Emma said without turning, sensing his presence. Isaac moved to stand beside her, looking down at the spring that had caused so much conflict. "Joe will need help getting back to the ranch. The cattle need tending." Emma nodded, a strange tightness in her throat. "Of course. You have responsibilities." "Yes," Isaac agreed quietly. "I do." They stood in silence for a moment, the burbling of the spring the only sound between them. So much remained unspoken, the bond forged in danger, the trust built through shared purpose, the feelings neither had dared to name. "Will you come back?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaac turned to her, then his weathered face softened by the fading evening light. "That depends," he said carefully, "on whether there's a reason to return." Emma met his gaze steadily, finding courage in the depth of his blue eyes. "There is," she said simply, if you want there to be. Isaac's hand moved to touch the red bandana she still wore around her neck. Sarah's bandana, now Emma's. His fingers lingered there, the connection between them palpable. When Daniel died, Emma continued, her voice strengthening, I thought that part of my life was over. I couldn't imagine ever feeling, ever wanting. She struggled for words. I understand, Isaac said gently. After Sarah and Elizabeth, I built walls around what remained of my heart. It seemed safer that way. And now, Emma asked. Isaac's hand moved from the bandana to cup her cheek. Now I find those walls crumbling despite my best efforts to maintain them. A smile touched Emma's lips. You did dive into a flash flood for us. Not the actions of a man determined to keep his distance. I've never claimed to be particularly wise, Isaac admitted, a rare smile lightening his features. Just stubborn. Emma laughed softly, the sound carrying across the water. Another quality we share. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. Then Lily stirred in her basket, breaking the spell. Emma bent to check on her daughter, tucking the blanket more securely around her. She likes you, Emma said, looking up at Isaac. She's never taken to anyone so quickly, not even Martha. She's an exceptional judge of character, Isaac replied solemnly, though his eyes twinkled. Like her mother. 3 days later, Isaac prepared to leave for his ranch. Joe Quinn's recovery having progressed enough for travel. The entire community gathered to see him off, offering thanks and handshakes for his role in freeing them from Harrington's grip. James clasped his former commander's hand firmly. Silver Springs owes you a debt we can never repay. There is no debt between friends, Isaac replied, echoing what he had said upon their first meeting. Martha embraced him warmly. You'll always have a place here, she said with a meaningful glance toward Emma, who stood slightly apart, Lily, in her arms. As the crowd dispersed, Isaac approached Emma and Lily. The baby reached for him immediately, tiny fingers grasping at his beard. He took her carefully, marveling as always at her fearless nature. She'll miss you, Emma said softly. And I her, Isaac replied, meeting Emma's gaze over Lily's head. Both of you. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Isaac, I've been thinking about what you said at the spring, about having a reason to return. He waited patient, as always, giving her the space to find her words. Daniel will always be part of me, she continued. Part of Lily. But he taught me that life is precious, too brief to waste in fear or regret. Her hand went to the red bandana at her throat. I think Sarah would say the same. Isaac's eyes glistened suspiciously in the morning light. She would, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. So I want you to know, Emma said, meeting his gaze steadily, that when you're ready to return, we'll be here, Lily and I, however long it takes. Isaac handed Lily back to her mother, then reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small carved wooden horse. Joe made this for Lily, he said, placing it in the baby's eager hands, to remember us until we return. He stepped closer, one hand gently touching the bandana at Emma's throat, the other carefully brushing a strand of hair from her face. The tenderness in the gesture brought tears to Emma's eyes. It won't be long, Isaac promised quietly. Some matters need settling at the ranch, arrangements made. Then, if you're certain... I am, Emma said firmly. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, a promise rather than a passion, a beginning rather than an ending. Around them, the sounds of Silver Springs faded to insignificance, leaving only the connection between two souls who had found each other against all odds. When they parted, Isaac rested his forehead against Emma's for a moment, breathing in the scent of her, committing it to memory for the days ahead. "Until then," he whispered. "Until then," she echoed. 1 year to the day after the flash flood that had brought them together, Isaac and Emma stood hand in hand beside Winding Creek. The water flowed peacefully within its banks, giving no hint of the destruction it had once wrought. Lily, now 18 months old, played nearby under Joe Quinn's watchful eye. The old ranch hand had recovered fully, though he walked with a more pronounced limp. He had fashioned a small fishing pole for Lily, though she seemed more interested in splashing in the shallows than catching anything. "Hard to believe it was only a year ago," Emma said, leaning against Isaac's solid strength. "So much has changed." "For the better," Isaac said, his arm tightening around her waist. The gold band on his finger caught the sunlight matching the one Emma wore. Their wedding 3 months earlier had been a simple affair celebrated by the entire community of Silver Springs. They had made their home at Isaac's ranch, expanded now to accommodate Emma's growing school. Children from neighboring homesteads rode in for lessons 3 days a week, their laughter filling the once silent rooms with new life. "Though I don't recommend flash floods as a way to meet your future spouse," Isaac added dryly. Emma laughed, the sound bright in the clear air. "No, but I'm grateful for that flood every day, despite how terrifying it was. It brought me to you." "No," Isaac corrected gently. "You were always meant to find your way here to this life, to me." The flood just hurried things along. Joe called to them, pointing at Lily, who had wandered perilously close to deeper water. Isaac moved with surprising speed for his size, scooping her up just as she was about to step off the bank. "Like mother, like daughter," he teased, swinging Lily high above his head. Her delighted giggles filled the air as Emma watched, her heart full to bursting with love for this family they had forged. In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, promising rain to the parched land. But this time, Emma felt no fear, only gratitude for the journey that had brought her home, and excitement for all the adventures yet to come. "Red waters brought us together," Isaac said softly, following her gaze to the gathering clouds. "But it's clear waters that sustain us." Emma smiled, taking his free hand in hers, their fingers intertwining like the streams that joined to form the creek before them. "Every river finds its way home eventually," she replied, "even the ones that take the longest, hardest paths." As they walked back toward their horses, Lily secure in Isaac's arms, Emma paused to look once more at the creek that had changed her life. The water flowed endlessly onward, as it had for centuries before them, and would for centuries after. A reminder that, like justice, like life itself, some forces could be delayed, but never truly stopped. The end.